I'm Mike Doyle. Welcome to the 1,000-Second Album Podcast. The must-hear song that I'm going to talk about today is L.A. Woman by The Doors.
Hi, I'm Jeff Stephen, and you're listening to the 1,000-Second Album Podcast. This season, we'll be talking about must-hear songs as I continue to ask people that are important to me all about the music that's important to them. Enjoy! Please welcome Mike Doyle.
Oh, it's good to be back, Jeff.
And welcome back, of course. And the song of choice today is The Doors' L.A. Woman. And can you tell me a bit about your Doors introduction?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back to the summer after my first year of high school. So I'm pretty sure summer after grade 9, I think likely at that point had my first Walkman. And I'm pretty sure one of the cassettes that I had for the Walkman at the time was The Doors' Greatest Hits. And if I remember correctly, it was a friend of mine, a guy that I'd met in grade 9 named Eric O'Shea, that sort of got me listening to The Doors. And once I got in there, I was kind of hooked. I got into all sorts of different avenues, learning more about Jim Morrison, learning more about the band, and listening to more of the individual albums after starting off with the greatest hits.
I like that. And it's funny you mentioned the summer after grade 9, because that's an eerily similar timeline for me, where instead of my friend being named Eric, they were named Mark. And at the time, he was really into Oliver Stone movies, and Oliver Stone had made the movie of The Doors. So I think Val Kilmer was in the lead role of Jim Morrison. And instead of on the Walkman, I think he'd upgraded to the CD player by that point, of the Discman. And so I have a vivid memory of that, The Doors, the movie soundtrack. And again, it took me a little bit longer to get into the rest of the catalog, but it was neat one day eventually hearing the 3 albums that ended up on the 1001 list. So the self-titled debut, Morrison Hotel, and finally, from whence this song came, L.A. Woman. And what is it about the song L.A. Woman that you particularly enjoy?
I think it's just got a great vibe to it. The intro of it is, it just kind of draws you in, you know. It starts with kind of a little a guitar chord that's kind of a little bit discordant. There's something about that chord, and then it's a little tap on the cymbals, and then the bass line starts, and then the guitar joins in, and the drums go full on, and then you're into the song. So I think just from start to finish, it goes through a bit of a tempo change in the bridge, and it picks up again towards the end. I think it's just got a great feel and a great vibe, and a really good representation of the Doors' work. Really, lots of different things going on there.
For sure, and and I like how you mentioned from start to finish as well, because it's not an efficient song. It's 7 minutes and 50 seconds or something like that. So it's a nice running time, and as you said, it goes through all those sort of different. It's almost like a song suite or something, because there's the different movements throughout. And you mentioned it sort of showcases what they do. Are there certain musical elements that you really enjoyed, like maybe a guitar line or a piano part?
I think, when I think about the song, I first think about the bass line at the start, but then, it comes in with Jim Morrison saying, I just got into town about an hour ago. And then there's like a little call and answer kind of thing between Morrison and Robbie Krieger's guitar, which, is kind of a classic blues thing, but it just kind of works. So I think that's sort of what catches me about the song. And as far as musicianship, I guess then you have the next thing is Ray Manzarek on the keys. Just is an amazing part of that band. And you think, it's a trio again. It's not your typical trio. You don't have a bass player necessarily all the time. I think Manzarek played a lot of the bass lines on his left with his left hand, but for them to have that full sound, and I think he's kind of the musical driving force of the band, is my understanding. So I think that's a great showcase for him as well. There's a nice interplay between the guitar at the start and the keyboards as well.
Yeah, for sure. And there's something about them, like you said, because they go through all those tempo changes and sort of style changes and the different dynamics, it feels like it would be tough to sort of set to a click track or like build up track by track. It does feel like the band is playing together.
I think you're likely right.
Yeah.
I read some stuff on the song this morning, sort of getting ready, but it didn't mention any of that. And the odd thing is, I don't think there's going to be, you're not going to see any live performances of the song, because about 3 months after the album came out, of course, Jim Morrison died. And so I was reading something, and it did say that, it's not really easy or possible to find a live version of that song.
Right. And that would have been 71 as well.
Yeah.
And just amazing how prolific they were in those 4 years, because I want to say the debut album was 67 or so, and this would have been studio album. I believe it was their 6th in 4 years or so.
Incredible. Yeah. And you sort of, one thing I came across this morning was kind of the story of their producer for the album had quit because he didn't like the direction some of the songs were going. They sort of pumped out those albums in relation to their recording contract. And in fact, they were looking at changing labels, but they were obligated to record one more album with Elektra, and that was LA Woman. So they kind of were doing it, not forced into it per se, but sort of to get it done.
Sure.
Yeah.
The contractual obligation
Yeah.
sort of thing. Well, if this is the sound of fulfilling the record contract detail, I think it's probably my favorite of their records. There's something really strong to it. Is it sort of a return to roots for them? Is that the idea, like where it's more bluesy than maybe some of their other ones had been prior to it?
I think so, and particularly the album before LA Woman was The Soft Parade, which seemed to catch a lot of bands of that era where they got one where they sort of became something they weren't. So if you listen to The Soft Parade, there's like orchestral accompaniments behind the music, and it just sort of, I think they received a lot of criticism about that album, and sort of not necessarily a sellout, but moving away from their roots. And I think LA Woman does represent sort of them going back to their origins and those sorts of things.
Yeah. And and in terms of the song as well, the music, obviously there's the stellar musicianship of the guys in the band. But of course, when people think the Doors, a lot of people will think of Jim Morrison. And is there anything about the lyrics that jumps off the page at you?
Well, I think when I first heard this song, I thought, LA Woman, it's about a woman. But it's really not. It's about him and his recognition of Los Angeles and sort of indicating it. Maybe we could think of that as his adopted hometown, where the Doors started out. And then, of course, later on in the song, in the bridge, you have the sequence where he goes through and he's, Mr. Mojo Rising. And he sort of used his nicknames before in other songs. So, he referred to himself as the Lizard King or what have you. But in fact, Mojo Rising is an anagram of Jim Morrison. So I'm not sure. What I looked at this morning, it wasn't clear if that was intentional or premeditated, but there was a story that John Densmore, the drummer, had said he wrote it on a chalkboard or something, and then went, "Oh, isn't that kind of cool? That's my name," sort of rearranged. So I don't know if it was on purpose or made up or who knows.
But it made for a great bridge.
For sure, yeah.
And it's funny because that's, when I revisited the song, that was to me probably the most memorable part of the song, was that sort of like everything had been brought down but then built back up when he started belting that out, and sort of the call and answer with the guitar too.
Yeah, and then basically a return to the first verse to finish off. Yeah.
Nice. So clearly a very good song, a memorable song, but why would you say that LA Woman is the must-hear song?
Well, I think as a kid, I sort of really got heavy into the Doors, really loved their music, hot and heavy for that 14, 15-year-old age. And I think Jim Morrison sort of represented that a little bit for people, that sort of teenage angst. I think as a person, reading his biography and stuff, he felt like he didn't fit in anywhere. And I think that's very identifiable for young people, feeling a little bit as an outsider, or a little bit like you don't have a place to belong. And I think that was, in a sense, who Jim Morrison was. But also sort of, drawing me into the band itself and listening to more of their music. And then actually, going beyond there and getting into other music and other bands from that era. So I think it's a great, why is it a must hear? Again, it's just got a great groove to it. Love the way it comes off, and I think it appeals to lots of different types of people or whatever. But I also think it's sort of a great gateway song to get you into music of that time period, music of the Doors specifically as well. So I think it is a must hear.
For sure. And that idea of him being that symbol for teens listening at age 14, 15, and fast forward a couple of decades and it's Kurt Cobain fills that role for a lot of people that I went to high school with, where, again, just represented that role for them as well. I do like that idea too, how you called it sort of, this is the Doors, like, if you want a song showing what the Doors were capable of or the representation of the group, I think this encapsulates it pretty well. And when you mentioned the good groove, I love the another tune on this album, Been Down So Long, just that steady bass groove, and that one is probably my favorite of the Doors ones, but I'd agree that this is a very appropriate gateway track there as well.
I think the other thing that's sometimes missed, is looking back, people have an image of Jim Morrison as obviously a drug user and heavy alcohol user, but I think Jim Morrison was a complicated individual. I think, if I recall correctly, a bit of an army brat, had moved around, didn't really feel at home anywhere. And I think sometimes, I guess, people, when they have this image of him and his drug and alcohol use, they forget that he wrote some really, really interesting lyrics, really had some complex thoughts, kind of considered himself a poet. There's some great lines in all of his songs.
Yeah. And that music of that time period, from the year 1971, I know our mutual friend Jim Talon loaned me a book about an author, I can't recall the name, but making the argument that was the peak of popular music, was the year 1971, that calendar year. And I'd say this strengthens that argument as well. And so I've always been loyal to 1969, or sort of the 3-year window between 94 and 96. But this one, definitely, it was the sound of a golden era. For
I've
sure.
been looking for that book.
Oh yeah,
I haven't read it. So that's great. I think it's a pretty strong case to be made that was a transitional time in rock music for sure.
For sure. So that's terrific, and a huge thank you for coming today, Mike, and until the next time.
Thanks, Jeff.
This has been the 1000 Second Album Podcast. Thanks for sharing some of your time, energy, and attention with us today. Take care.